etc. So it's a planned economy, and they do not educate. This is a direct quote from Professor Boyce, Eugene Boyce, University of Georgia. They do not educate for jobs that do not exist. He wrote a very interesting book on that, and he was not a conservative, but he was talking about the Soviet system. Same thing here. They're not going to educate your child in Bath, Maine, to be whatever she may want to be. Maybe she's going to want to be a landscape artist, if there isn't an opening, or a lot of people out there who need that, she won't get an education here. She'll have to move elsewhere. Okay. So anyway, that my office was devastating. The values, attitudes, values, and beliefs program, the change programs to destroy values that I found for elementary school throughout the country. One was in Michigan, Lansing, Michigan, where they pre and post tested little kids before the program, pre-test to see where the values were, put them through the program, ask them all about mom and dad, what goes on at home, what's this, what's that, all to do with their behavior and attitudes. And after the program's finished, post-test to see if it worked. That is going on day in and day out in the American public school system. And when parents and whoever hear about test scores, assessment, etc., don't think that's traditional academics. It isn't. The mandated federal test, which came out of my office as well, the National Assessment for Education Progress, is 60% politically correct. So when you hear that your children in your state haven't done well on it, maybe you should say, I'd like to see the test, rather than just assuming that anything coming out of the United States Department of Education is anything other than plain evil. It's a Marxist factory. And I know that's true, and I know someone who was heading up an NIE, who didn't last too long. He was a great educator, who said that. National Institute of Education, it used to be called. Mm-hmm. And the director of it, he got fired under Ronald Reagan. He was the former head of the Cathedral School for Girls in Washington. No lightweight educator, a very fine educator, not a political guy. He was a political appointee, but what I'm saying, he was not a rabid conservative or a rabid liberal. He was just a good educator who had that job. And he got fired because he wanted to get rid of his own office. And he knew as well as I did, I think he was the one who referred to it being a Marxist factory. So it's just as well for people to know that. Now, Ronald Reagan, he could have gotten rid of the department, and if he didn't get rid of the department, if he couldn't have gotten that through Congress, he could have gotten rid of the office that I was in, the National Institute of Education, because that director recommended himself that his own office be abolished. That was the office that had to go. That was the office that dealt with testing, teacher training, program development, all these rotten programs out of the National Diffusion Network. If that office had gone, we would have really been in pretty good shape to get rid of the rest of it. So you'll find the conservatives all defending Reagan on that. Oh, well, it wasn't his fault. Do you really think it was his fault? It's probably his fault. If I ever again hear about any government cabinet secretary or director of an office like the National Institute of Education or out of the White House saying, being excused by the public as, oh well, it's not his fault. It's not Bush's fault. It's Karl Rove. Or it's someone else. Or, he doesn't know what's going on. Look. Okay, if you don't know what's going on, you shouldn't be in the White House. He knows he's not particularly bright, George Bush, but he's doing an awfully good job for those who want to take us down. You can't say that he isn't doing a wonderful job, because Iraq was never meant to work the way we were told. They have to destroy the Middle East first in order to restructure it as a region. Okay? You asked about regions? All right, let's go back to regions. It's easier to deal with regions than it is with countries. And I think it was Lenin who said, we, the communists, will set up regions around the world. You implement socialism in about 8 or 10 regions. You get it, okay? The European Union is a very good example. That is a region. That is the region, that is the prototype for all the other regions around the world. The one they're setting up in Africa, Middle East, Bush, Vicente Fox, Martin, Canada. Here, got about 10 regions being set up, okay? Gorbachev sometimes really is useful. He said in London 3 or 4 years ago, he said, and think of this in terms of the United States region with Mexico and Canada too. He said the European Union is the new European Soviet. Now if that doesn't send chills up your spine for the old Europe, nothing will. But if you don't care about Europe, what do you think Gorbachev would say about what George Bush is putting in here? Wouldn't he say that the merger of Mexico, the United States, and Canada is what? I'm going to ask the audience. Not the new European Soviet, but the new what? American Soviet. Oh, and then Americans say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, I say is, then that's the education system. See, you, it's not your fault. It's not your fault, but it's not too late. You have been deliberately dumbed down. You ask me what's wrong with that. You better go find out what's wrong with any form of government that has an ism on the end of it. Fascism, communism, whatever. Nazism. The United States, we are a Republican form of government, representative form of government. We're not a democracy. Thank God we're not a democracy. I mean, the communist countries call themselves democracies. Do you understand me? Huh? They do. Democracies where, it's majority rules. We don't have that form of government, thank heavens. We don't. So, what's going in right now could never have been put in had it not been for a diabolical plan. I call it the 5-pronged fork. So I keep adding prongs to it, but let's go through this because you can understand. I came up with this because I do a lot of radio work, and I was getting really tired of beating up on the audience all the time. I just felt that I was always saying, come on folks, get with it. What's wrong with you? How come you haven't seen these things? Why have you not done something about it? And then I realized that it was a stroke of good from the good Lord, probably helping me out. All Americans who are alive right now, and those who've died, recently, they have been victimized. We have been subjected to at least a 100-year plan, and it was a very simple plan, and I think it has five prongs. I call it a 5-pronged fork. Let's go through it. Gradualism. Everybody knows about the frog in the cold water. Okay, we were talking about Whitney and the rest of them back in 1880, making their plans to control both parties and how this would work out. And the Carnegie Corporation was the one who was given the job to destroy American academic education. I've got all the documents on that. And all these things that have happened, Ronald Reagan signing the agreement with Gorbachev to merge the two education systems. There's so much in, say, since 1880 to 1980 and to now. But they start out and they do everything slowly. And the frog, is boiled slowly. The